but I want to talk a little bit about typography because you can apply the same effect to typography to really create some neat effects with it. So we're going to do something similar to this and kind of do some isometric designs with typography. So let's go ahead and slide these examples off to the side. Let's type in with some type. Let's do isometric. Let's pick out a nice bold typeface. Let's go with Amboy. I'm doing Amboy black. So just a nice solid typeface. And we could do the same thing with the 3D options. And let's pick a color while we're at it. So we're going to have two things going on. We're going to have a fill and a stroke. So let's just have two different colors so we can see how that is going to react. So now we're going to go up and do the same thing we've been doing before. 3D, extrude, and bevel. And what we can do is we can do some different layouts. We don't always have to stick with geometric left. So geometric right will line up with our iPad. And let's do something a lot smaller with our depth. Let's do 10. And you can see how the stroke becomes kind of the other parts of the 3D that extends behind the text. So you can definitely change that color as well as the main color. So let's kind of adjust our plastic shading here, and I might need to zoom in a bit with this one so I can show you. So when we do our plastic shading, if we kind of do what we've done before, it'll have a nice smooth glass kind of look to it. We can increase our highlight intensity. We can increase our ambient light to make that fill or that stroke orange a little bit brighter. So once you feel happy with how the light is being cast, you can click on OK. And we can brighten this up by, instead of making it black, we can make it white text. This case with the word isometric, we kind of have a two-tone of the same family. We both have oranges. So let's try a different orange here for this one. And we can increase or decrease the ambient light to get it to be a little bit brighter. Perfect. And maybe let's change the extrude depth to be a little skinnier. So it's pretty easy. Make sure you play around with stroke. If you didn't have any stroke on, that's kind of how it would look like. It would all kind of blend together. But because you added the stroke, it kind of adds that two-tone ability to have more shading on the other side. So we did this one. Let's see what happens if we copy and paste it. We did design. But we can also quickly change, if we go back into our appearance, 3D, we can change the isometric right to isometric left. We can also change the color profile here. Let's do white text with maybe some blue. Kind of bring out the blue we have in the design, just like that. And using the grid, you can line these up. Make some pretty cool arrangement of typography. And you can keep going with this. Type in a generic word and just think about all the applications you can have with this 3D layered type. You can already probably start to see some things you can do. So this is isometric top, and we're going to talk about isometric top in a little bit. We've been doing left and right this whole time. But I mean, think of kind of some things you can do when you have all these different angles that you could do with typography. You can really create this 3D environment without having to be in a 3D program. And that's why I really wanted to go over these 3D tools to show you that. So I'm just trying a couple of funky colors just to kind of show you what you can do. I lined up this on the isometric grid to kind of bring it down here and to help me kind of find the right location and placement. Just like with this, we have this kind of floating a little bit on this isometric plane or base. We could do the same thing with our type here. We could just duplicate our type, make it all black. Go ahead and right-click Create Outlines. That might make this process a little bit easier on Adobe Illustrator. So now it's just an outlined object that is now all black. We have a Gaussian blur, and we're just going to put this behind our layer. We can have it float. We can have it just cast a shadow behind it. Whatever we want to do. Let's definitely reduce the opacity. We just want a little hint of shadow to make it look like it's standing up. We can also cast this by warping it. We could do envelope distort, make with mesh. Let's do one row. I cover this in a couple lessons. in the previous course, but we're just going to have it cast downward. See how I'm changing the perspective of the shadow, just kind of warping it manually. So a lot of options we can do to cast that. We could even, another option, just showing you all sorts of different ways you can tackle things. Up to appearance, go to our extrude and bevel, and let's do a different isometric presentation. Let's do an isometric top. There's an isometric top. We're going to click OK. It's now flat on the surface, and we're just going to rotate this to make it cast behind it. So this is a different way to do a different type of shadow. And let's screen it back and shift it over. So now we can have this perfectly cast shadow on the front, just like that. Or we can have it cast behind. So now we're going to tackle one quick thing. I'm not going to do the entire iPhone that you see in this preview. I'm just going to show you what it's like to use isometric top instead of what we've been using. So let's say we want to create a little iPhone. We could do it in the same way we did the iPad. Rectangle tool, slightly rounded corners. And we're going to do the 3D tool, but we're going to use it a little bit differently. We're going to have a different preset. We're going to do isometric top. We're going to change the extrude depth to make it a realistic iPhone depth. And of course change our lighting. We can even add a little bit of a gray here so that we can get the bottom. So this is what I did. I just have a black shape. And for the stroke, I added a light gray to kind of get the metallic side. But I'm going to stick with a solid gray because that is what the lighting effects and the 3D tool will really help you do. So now we want to make the screen a little bit reflective because right now it's just a solid color. We like to reflect some of the light of the blue and just create some better lighting effects for the screen. So let's select our little iPhone we just created. Instead of just a solid fill black, let's make it a gradient. Just making it a standard black to white gradient, and we're going to edit this a little bit. So let's change this color. Let's change this white to be fairly dark, but add like a little hint of blue. See how I'm adding a tiny hint of blue there, just to give it a little bit of the reflection from the blue base. We could of course continue to change the direction on this. We can make this a radial. We can even add a third color. Do something a little bit different, add a little bit of warm tone to it. So you notice how I had just a little bit of warm tones, and it makes the gradient a lot more dynamic. I just got to be careful with how it extends outward. So that's kind of your iPhone. And let's say we want to add little details to the iPhone, like the microphone area, which is that little area you see at the top. We're just going to make that a solid black fill. So we're going to go to extrude and bevel. It's on no extrude depth, or we need to change that to 0. Isometric top, and let's slide that right. Let's move that right on the top, and we got our little microphone. So just using the isometric grid to find placement for certain items. Also duplicated the iPhone and did a shadow, and with your shadows, of course, the more distance you create, the more it has that floating effect. So whatever you want to go for, and I'm just going to back off that shadow just a little bit. You don't have to do a blurred shadow. If you want to do a direct light source, you can make it non-blurred and just do flat. So you can add things on top of the iPhone just like we did before. We can even add a little sign, like a little heart sign. So we're just going to make that ourselves. And just do a little arrow going downward. We could just join these together using the shape builder tool really quickly. So now it's one object. And we could do what we've done before. We can even put like a little heart icon in there if we wanted to. Group these together and just simply do what we've been doing this entire section. And we could do this differently. We could do an isometric right, which is what we've been doing. Let's just do a 5, extrude. Change our lighting. Or we can even do an isometric left, which is not one that we've done a whole lot. Click on OK, and you can drag it over, and you can see how we're using isometric left, right, and top to create kind of this interesting effect where some things are left, right, top, and it just kind of creates this really interesting layered effect. This is showing you some basics here. I'm going to show you one more thing, and then we're going to be completely done. we're going to show you how to find some of these isometric people and bring those in.